Hi, thank you for coming this morning. I'm Monira.
And I'm Oli.
And today we're going to talk about how to build products people care about. So we're gonna run through the presentation first and have some time at the end for questions, so you can come and talk to us. And also you can use this hashtag to ask questions, start a discussion, and give us feedback, and we'll check it out at the end of the talk. Two seconds. So Oli and I are both product managers at ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks is a consulting company. We help our client continuously improve and deliver quality software. And we're also quite passionate about helping industry improve, and we do this by writing articles, books, running events, and talking at conferences. So overall, we have more than 15 years experience in the industry. We work for many different companies and help them build products as consultants, but also build products in teams of our own. We made many mistakes. We learned a lot. And we want to share this experience with you today.
So let's start out with the really bad news. Unfortunately, 95% of all products fail. Every year, there's around 30,000 new products launched to the market around the world. And with every new product that's launched, there's a hopeful team, individual, or company behind them that believe they're going to be one of the ones that launch the 1,500 products that succeed every year. And amazingly, in a survey that tried to understand why so many products fail, they found that almost half were because there was nobody that actually needed the product that had been built in the first place. In fact, if we look at the top 5 reasons why products fail, we see quite a common theme. So, firstly, there's no market fit. There just weren't enough people out there that actually wanted the product that had been built. Secondly, the team or the individual ran out of money before they could get to product market fit, so they just didn't have the money to get there to find the people that needed the product. 3, there were just better competitors out there. There's other people doing exactly the same thing, generating the same value for their customers. 4, there was pricing or cost issues. So this could be the company couldn't get the price low enough to make it appealing in the market, or they made it low enough, but the cost of actually producing that product or providing that value was just too high to make it sustainable. Or number 5, they just couldn't find a business model. So they might have built the most amazing product and people might have loved it, but they couldn't find a way to charge for it, and they couldn't find a way to make it sustainable. So as you can see, none of these issues revolve around the technical implementation of your product. If you can't get people to use the product, it doesn't really matter how good the technology is. Unfortunately, that product's going to become one of the 95% that fail every single year.
But the good news is you don't have to work on one of those failures. It's actually quite easy to build a product people care about. 1, find a problem that's shared by enough people. And 2, solve that problem for them better than they can currently solve it. You'd be surprised at how some of the most successful companies are focused on solving simple problems.
I need to remember things and find them later on. Evernote.
I need a way to take payments on my website. Stripe.
I want to listen to whatever song I want right now. Spotify.
I want to access my files from anywhere. Dropbox.
Pretty simple, right? So why is it that 95% of all products fail? Well, most people take a build-first approach. So they have a great idea for a product. They go away, they build a version of this product, and then they take it out to potential users. They cross their fingers, and then they hope that people are going to like the product. So if they do find people that like the product, they then try and take it out to more people who are quite similar, and they try and build a business upon it. So this is definitely one way that you can build products, but it's really high risk. Other people, they start with a really good idea. They start with good intentions, and they do some early due diligence. But unfortunately, they get lost along the way, particularly when they take products out to customers. They start getting feedback from their customers, and their customers start asking for specific product changes and specific features.
Today, we want to help you not fall into this trap and show a practical way to approach building products differently. So we'll show you how, 1, turn your ideas into measurable targets, 2, break down your targets into customer actions, and 3, build up products through experimentation.
So remember, if you're building a product, you're an investor in it. It's just that you invest with time, not money. And time is far more valuable than money. So invest really wisely. Do the due diligence really early and understand where you should focus your time most to get the most output. And then this is how you can build products that people really care about. After all, life is too short to build something that nobody wants.
So you have an idea. Where do you start from here? Traditionally, people take a top-down approach to defining their minimum viable success. The logic is, if you can capture 1% of a huge market, then you're set. This is how a lot of VCs do their early assessments. For example, if you take 1% of a 100 billion market, that actually makes 1 billion, so it's quite good. But there's a few problems with this. It gives you a false sense of comfort. It doesn't explain how to get the 1% market share. And finally, how do you know 1% is the right measure for your product?
So a better approach comes from the bottom up, thinking about what success would look like to you personally. So your minimum success criteria are the smallest outcomes that would deem a product successful for you. Some tips to do this are, so 1, keep your time box under 3 years. If we think further out than 3 years, it's too difficult for us to predict what's going to happen in the future. Number 2, frame the outcome in terms of a revenue goal. So a yearly revenue goal helps keep this model really simple. So how much money a year would you like to make from your product? And then 3, remember the goal is a rough ballpark. So ask yourself a simple question. Are you trying to build a $100,000 a year business, a $1 million a year business, a $10 million a year business, or a $100 million a year business? It's all just a question of scale and what you'd be happy with. So think about what the minimum level of success you'd be happy with for a product that you build, and then just keep this in your head because you're going to need that number later on.
So now that you've decided what's your minimum viable success for your product, what's next? Well, you can't go from 0 to your goal in one step. Products actually grow in stages, and it's important to understand what are the different stages that we need to go through to get to a goal. So the first stage is problem-solution fit. This is, at this stage, you're trying to find out if your idea represents a significant enough problem to make it worth solving. It's not enough to measure what your prospects say. You have to measure what they do as well. So that means you need to put an offering in front of them and see what's happening. Then you have product market fit. So at this stage, you're trying to build a business model around your product. You need to demonstrate that you can create repeatable value for your customers, and then you can capture this value back in terms of revenue before investing too heavily into the product. And finally, you have scale. So this is when you have found your market, proven the sustainability of your business model, and now you're trying to push for the growth of your products to realize its full potential. So this is how you break down your minimum level of success that we've talked about earlier. So the minimum level of success is the target for scale. But how do you calculate product market fit and problem solution fit?
So venture capitalists Andreessen Horowitz use the 10x model as a way to target the growth for their startups. It's not precise, but it serves as a ballpark to assess if your product is commercially feasible. And you can work backwards from where we want our product to be at scale to find out how much revenue and how many customers we need at each of the stages to go to the next one. So let's look at a little example. So we want to build a business which can make $5 million a year in revenue. And we charge $1,000 a year for our customers to use our product. So to reach our $5 million a year in revenue, we'll need 5,000 customers, each paying $1,000 a year to reach that target. So if we divide those numbers by 10, we'll get our numbers for product market fit. So obviously 5,000 divided by 10, 500 customers, and $5 million a year divided by 10, $500,000 a year in revenue. And then if we divide the numbers we have for product market fit, again, by 10, we'll get to problem solution fit. So 50 customers and $50,000 a year in revenue. And you can see as we move from one stage, problem solution fit, to the next stage, product market fit, we're actually 10xing our growth, and the same as we move from product market fit to scale.
So let's take a company as an example for this, and let's look at Tesla. So at the problem-solution fit stage for Tesla, they were trying to solve the anxiety of the range of the anxiety that people had around the range of an electric motor. So they built the Roadster. And from 2008 to 2012, they sold 2,450 cars. In 2013, with the Model S, they 10x their growth by selling 25,000 cars. And the approach for this was to release the product as quickly as possible to the market and then do incremental software update to improve it. And in 2008, Tesla successfully managed to sell 250,000 cars, 10xing what they did before, and actually reaching scale. And they did this by continuing to work on the Model S, but also launching the Model 3, which is a more mainstream vehicle accessible to more people. So you can clearly see the 3 different stages of the products and the different problems they were trying to solve and how they approached it, and how the growth went through 10xing all the time. So they will continue to grow as they look to further scale into different categories. But they'll also continue to deliver the 500,000 order they got for the Model 3 at launch.
So there are a number of benefits of the 10x model. So number one, you have a single goal that follows you all the way through from idea all the way to scale. So you're focused on increasing the number of customers that use the product. It makes the early stages of your product really measurable. So we can know if we're on the right track within the first couple of months of launching our product, rather than having to wait for a couple of years to see if we hit our goals for scale. It's a lot less daunting to start as well. So you just need to get the first 50 customers. That should be your number one goal. You don't need to worry about hitting the 5,000 customers straight away. And it exposes the biggest risk to your product early, which is almost always customer adoption. So by keeping the numbers really small at the early stages, it allows us to focus on optimizing the value that we create for the individual customers, rather than just trying to get as many customers into our product as possible. And by doing this, we can build a much more sustainable product.
So what do you need to remember? First, define the amount of revenue that would make your product successful for you. Then, decide a price and calculate how many customers you need to reach your minimum level of success. And finally, use the 10x model to define measurable goals for the 3 stages of your product growth.
So now you have a target for problem-solution fit. How do you break it down? Well, before we can work out how to hit our goals, we need to understand that the purpose of our product is to create value for our customer. We do this through our product's unique value proposition, which is the intersection between our customers' problems and our solution. Your customers always get more value from your product, even if this is just perceived value, than they pay for it. Otherwise, and so when they pay for it, this is their captured value. Otherwise, they just won't have the incentive to use your product in the first place. As a general rule, our product's unique value proposition must include one of these 3 things. It must either be faster than what currently exists, cheaper than what currently exists, or easier to use than what currently exists. Without this, there's really little chance that the customers are going to change their habits and adopt your product. And then the cost of creating this value must also be less than or equal to the value you can capture back from your customers. Otherwise, really simply, you're just going to lose money. It's really important to understand that capturing value from your customers is the key to gaining traction with your product.
So the aim of our product is to create value for our customers and capture enough of that value back for ourselves. And it works by taking unaware visitors in our product, creating and delivering value within our product, and then outputting happy customers. So the goal is to convert unaware visitors into paying customers to justify building the product in the first place. We can measure our product efficiency by calculating the rate at which non-paying visitors are converted into paying customers. So if you remember earlier, we broke down our big scale goal into much more smaller and achievable ones. And we found that for problem-solution fit, we needed to have 50 happy customers. And this forms the output of our product. So right now, our product is a black box. So we know the output we need to achieve. So let's open it up and see what's happening inside.
So there are multiple stages within our product, but the main 3 that we should be focused on are acquisition, activation, and revenue. So acquisition is the first stage of our product. So this is where you turn unaware visitors into interested prospects. You might have the best product in the world, but it doesn't matter if you do. If no one knows about it, your business model is going to be a non-starter and you won't be able to get going. So firstly, you should focus on making people aware of your product and then getting people to sign up for it. The second stage is activation. So once you have a potential customer signed up, the next challenge is connecting what you promised them at the point of acquisition with their first user experience. So our goal here should be to close the gap between what you promised your users and that first experience of value. And then we should be trying to get them to that value as quickly as possible, and also to get them to experience that value as many times as possible to get them to be activated. And then the third stage is revenue. So after our potential customers experience the value of our product, we might be able to convert them to paying. So this is where revenue is generated. So remember, you first have to create value for your customer before you can capture any of it back. So focus on creating the value first, as we discussed earlier on. So as you might have guessed, the numbers of customers diminishes through the product as we move through acquisition, activation, and revenue. So we know how many people that we need to hit our goal for problem solution fit. We said we need 50 happy customers. And so we need 50 paying customers at this point. So now, how do we work out how many customers we need to acquire to our product to reach our 50 customers? So the standard conversion rate for a software as a service product in the industry, from people signing up to the product to people paying for the product, is 1%. And we can use this to work out how many people we need to acquire to reach our target. So in our case, obviously, we can times our 50 paying customers by 100, and then we realize that we're going to need to acquire around 5,000 customers to our product to get 50 people to pay for it. So straight away, you can see how our perspective has just shifted. We thought we needed to get 50 customers, but actually we need to acquire 5,000 to reach our goal for problem solution fit. But the good thing is we now have an actionable goal for acquisition.
So let's look at a real example of this with the Dropbox. So the value proposition of Dropbox, as stated on their website, is data is securely backed up and synced automatically to multiple devices with no human intervention. So that's what they propose as a value. And when a user uses Dropbox and drops a document into a folder and accesses it from somewhere else, this is when they realize this value. So this is the activation step. If you look at the other steps that we talked about earlier, so acquisition is all the steps that people take to actually sign up to Dropbox. And for revenue, if you want to store more than 2 gigabytes of data onto Dropbox, then you have to pay. And Dropbox has multiple strategies to get you to reach that limit. So as we've described just now, acquisition, activation, and revenue is like so the usage of Dropbox is when they create value, and the revenue stage is when they capture value back. So now, if we look at the numbers and how they convert paying customers into, let's look at numbers and how they convert non-paying customers into paying customers. So currently, they have 500 million people signed up to Dropbox, and those 500 million, there's 11 million that are actually paying, and so this gives us a conversion rate of 2.2%. As we mentioned earlier, the standard for the industry is 1%, so they are actually making double, which is quite good.
So what do you need to remember? Well, number one, remember the value equation. Understand the relationship between the value creation and value capture. Make sure you create more value for your customer than you're trying to capture back from them. Secondly, break down your product into 3 stages: acquisition, activation, and revenue, and then measure the conversion rates of customers through each stage of the product. And then thirdly, focus your attention on improving the stages with the lowest conversion rate until you reach your goal for problem solution fit. So this is how you go from just having an idea to actually having a business.
So now that you have a goal for acquisition, activation, and revenue, how do you approach building your product? So generally, if you're building a new product, you will want to test it from left to right, which means first investigating if you can get enough customers into your product. This is the biggest risk to your product's potential success. If you can't get enough people into your product, it doesn't matter how good it is, they will never see it. So by testing this, we are validating our core assumption that visitors would be interested enough in our idea, our unique value proposition, that they would sign up for our product.
So to test this assumption, we can use the scientific method to form a hypothesis, run an experiment, and measure the results to prove or disprove the assumptions that we've made. So using the scientific method is a powerful way to ensure we have an objective view that uses relevant metrics to independently review the hypothesis without applying our own biases in interpreting the results. So the first step in forming a hypothesis is that we must have a premise that we believe in, a result we expect to achieve, and a way to measure if we've achieved it. So an example of a hypothesis we could run is, we believe that putting posters advertising our fresh fruit delivery service in corporate offices where our potential target customers are will result in potential customers texting our number and placing an order. We'll know we're successful when at least 5 people per office contact us for an order. So the measurement part of a hypothesis is one of the trickiest but most valuable parts. So to come up with a number, you can use previous data for your market if you have it. And this is often true if you've got a more mature product that's already out there in the market. But if not, which is especially true when you're launching a new product, you can use industry averages. So for example, like the average conversion rate for a landing page for a software as a service product from customers arriving on the page to signing up is 2.35%. So this could form the baseline as a measure for your hypothesis.
So once your hypothesis is defined, it's time to test it. There are many different ways to test a hypothesis, but there is one immutable rule. An experiment must be run with your customer. We're looking to test if there are enough people interested in the product to make it worthwhile pursuing. And we can use one of these types of experiments. Facade ads, for example. So they are targeted online ad campaigns used to measure customer interest in a potential product offering. It's easy to target specific groups of people and experiment to test different value proposition, product descriptions, or wording against each other and see what resonates most. You can commit a small budget and gather great insight about your potential customers. And for this, using Google Ads or Google AdWords or Facebook's are great tools to use. And the key is to be specific about your target.
Another type of experiment you can run, use landing pages. So these are pages where potential customers can register their interest in our product and we can measure their engagement. So a great example of a company that's used landing pages really successfully is Buffer. So Buffer is an app that allows you to queue up your social media posts and it will post them out automatically for you according to a schedule that you've set. But before going away and building Buffer, the founder wanted to see if there was actually anybody who needed this service or wanted this sort of product. So he created a simple landing page, which you should be able to see on the left up here, and it just explained what Buffer did. So if people are actually interested in the product offering, people could click on the plans and pricing button, and then they'd be taken to a page that you can see on the right, which says, hello, you caught us before we're ready. We're working really hard to put the finishing touches to Buffer, but in the meantime, if you put your email address in, we'll let you know when we launch. Now, obviously, they hadn't actually started developing Buffer yet. They hadn't written any code at all. He just tweeted out the page, people came, and some people even left their email addresses. So this was a good signal. It showed that some people were interested in what Buffer was offering, and it showed that they had a problem that was worth exploring a little bit more. So they've proven that people were interested in Buffer. But the real question is, would people actually pay money to use the product? So they updated their landing page, and they added a plans and pricing page now with 3 plans. So they offered the product for free, they offered it for $5 a month, and for $20 a month. And so the result of this experiment was that people were still clicking through and giving their email addresses. The pricing hadn't put them off. And even a small number of people were clicking through on the paid plans. So the Buffer team now knew what their conversion rates were going to be for the different price points. And they knew that they'd validated that they had a problem truly worth solving that people were prepared to pay for.
So another type of experiments you could run is a Wizard of Oz, where the backend service is implemented by a human without the user knowing it. So basically, you can provide a front end for your products where people can buy, yet you fulfill your product's purpose manually. And it provides you with a great opportunity to verify the demand for a product that so far only exists in someone's mind. So Zappos is a famous example of this. It started in 1998 as a Wizard of Oz and got bought by Amazon in 2009 for $1.2 billion. So the founder at Zappos decided to test the assumption that people would be willing to buy shoes online without trying them on. And in 1998, it was still a new concept. So how did he test this hypothesis? Well, he went to local shops, took photographs of shoes and advertised them online. And when people were buying it, so he'd go back to the shop, buy the shoes, and ship it to customers. And the customers had no idea that he had no inventory and that all the orders were processed manually. So as you can see, a Wizard of Oz is a fast and effective way of testing a hypothesis as to whether a proposed solution will create value for customer. And because the testing is performed manually, you can quickly modify your experiments and test a large number of hypotheses.
So when you're choosing the different types of experiment to run, there's many different types you can choose, but you need to find the right balance between the cost, time, and effort it takes to build the experiment and the learning value you can get from actually launching it. So an example of an experiment which is really costly to do is a working prototype. So in this case, it's going to take a significant amount of time, people, resources to prepare the experiment and build it. Whereas a low-cost experiment could be a customer interview, where you just go to speak to a customer and ask them some specific questions. On the other axis, a high-learning experiment could be a Kickstarter campaign. So people are literally paying for your product before you've ever gone ahead and built it. And so in this case, this is one of the highest forms of validation you can get from an experiment. And you're going to have high confidence in the results. Whereas if you did a survey of the market, for example, you might get some interesting information, but you're probably going to have low confidence in the accuracy of the results of that experiment. So none of these things are bad. None of these experiments are bad. But you shouldn't always choose the cheapest option. Depending on what you're trying to test, it might be worth choosing a more costly experiment, because that data will give you better learning about the behaviors of your potential customer. And the common denominator is that everything is an experiment. There's no such thing as launching a product without an experiment. Even if you go away, you go and build an MVP of your product, and it takes you 3 months, and then you launch it, you're still running an experiment. You just might not realize it. It's just that some experiments just turn out to be more costly than others and give better learning than others.
So once you have decided on the types of experiments to use to test your hypothesis, we are ready to build our experiments, launch and measure the results with our customers, and finally reflect on the learning we gain. And a good way to visualize this is by using the build, measure, learn loop. And the key to experimentation is to be able to iterate fast. So as a rough guide, use 2 weeks for building, 2 other weeks for measuring to get enough data, and finally, 2 weeks to make sense of it and decide what to do next. The learning you gain from every experiment you run should feed back into the list of assumptions you have about your product. And the learning may validate or invalidate other assumptions, but it also helps you form new hypotheses and then go through the loop again. So this is the whole thing. So let's walk through an example of how to test the acquisition stage for a new product. So this is Wombat. It's an experiment we ran with our team a few weeks ago, actually. So for this idea, we estimated that there was enough people in the market to make this a worthwhile product to invest in. But we were not sure if the problem we've identified was enough of a pain for people to be willing to pay for it. So we created a hypothesis and decided to test the demand for this with this experiment. And so during the build phase, we refined our proposition with the interview. We designed the landing page that would explain what the product did. We set up an AdWord campaign, and we set up analytics to measure what were people doing when they were coming to the page. And then we let this experiment run for 2 weeks. We monitored the traffic we received and make some small tweaks to the ad campaign, but mostly we calculated our conversion rate.
So once 2 weeks had passed, we looked at the results to pull out the insights that we'd got. So our conversion rate validated our demand hypothesis. So we were expecting to get 3% of the visitors who visited the site to sign up, but we actually got 4.25%. It seemed like people were indeed identifying with the problem we were proposing to solve, and were interested in the potential product. It also gave us an early evaluation of the cost of actually acquiring customers. And so through Google Ads, we saw how expensive it was. And this invalidated some of the lower price points that we thought that we might be able to sell our product for, because it would just be too costly to capture customers and then charge them such a low price. And we also got a better understanding of what people were searching for when they hit our page. So we saw which AdWords were working best, we could see what people were searching for, and so then we could work out who our early adopters of our product could be, and who we should be targeting. So all of this helped us refine our value proposition, and it formed the next set of hypotheses that we could write, and the experiments that we could then go ahead and build. And so this is still an ongoing story. I don't really have an end to this yet, but it's just a real-life illustration of how the build, measure, learn loop works in action, and a possible way to test demand for a new product in a really cheap and fast way. So depending on the environment that you're working in and your context, you might be able to shorten the feedback loop. So if you remember, we said we took 2 weeks to build, 2 weeks to measure, and 2 weeks to learn. But we were running this experiment in a really big corporate environment. And so this presented a number of different trade-offs we had between the speed of implementation, the compliance we had to follow, and the processes that we had. So nonetheless, we still managed to run this experiment, and we managed to run multiple other experiments in parallel. So I think this just demonstrates how you can run experimentation in corporates as much as you can in startups.
So as mentioned, you will get new insights from running your experiments. Your hypothesis might be validated or invalidated. But regardless, this new information has an impact on what you do next. And it's important to go back to capture new assumptions, form new hypotheses, and go through the experimentation loop again. The going back and reviewing your assumption step is crucial when you build a new product. The reason for this is what you think is a good idea is usually the product of inspiration and interpretation. This is your own worldview, which very often is not reality. And it's okay, we all have this bias, it's called confirmation bias. The only thing to remember is everything is an experiment. Just some experiments cost more than others and come with more risk. Finding the courage to see the discrepancy between your worldview and reality and course correct accordingly is what makes your products more likely to succeed. This is what pivoting is. So when you disprove a hypothesis, don't keep pushing the same idea. It's a lot easier to change. It's a lot easier for you to change what you do than to change what customers want. Don't fall in love with your creation. Test quickly and be ruthless when it's not working.
So what do you need to remember? Well, number one, an experiment must always be done with the customer. 2, you can use hypotheses to frame your assumptions and then run experiments to validate or invalidate them. And number 3, it's crucial to keep the feedback loop as short as possible, especially when you're launching a new product, because this is where the uncertainty levels are most high. So this is where you can go from having a product concept to getting it into reality.
So you should be looking to run experiments throughout your products to optimize the process of converting visitors into happy customers. And you can build the products completely through experimentation. So now that you have validated that the core assumption that visitors would be interested enough in the product that they would sign up for it, how do we focus on next experiment?
So the events that happen within the product that we talked about earlier, acquisition, activation, and revenue, they're the major goals that we need to achieve. But to make effective change to the conversion rates of customers through each step of the product, we need to understand the steps that a customer takes on the journey through the product to be able to measure how they interact at each stage, and then we can work out where to focus our effort best. So let's look at a potential acquisition journey a customer could take through our product.
So this is the acquisition journey for GitHub. So for this, customers arrive on the site. They navigate to the sign-up form. They enter their personal details. They pick a plan. They fill in the personalization survey, and then they acquire their sign-up. So in this example, we need to acquire 14 customers a day to reach our acquisition target. So looking at the breakdown of these steps and measuring the number of customers going through the different stages, we can start to see where are the bottlenecks. In this case, we have 10 customers entering their personal details, but we can't move those 10 to the personalization survey because Pick a Plan only converts 7 out of the 10. So the step that has the lowest output in the journey is the bottleneck. And it doesn't matter if you remove all the bottlenecks after, it won't convert more customers to acquired. So now that you have identified that pick a plan is the bottleneck, you can capture the assumption as to why this might be happening and begin to formulate a hypothesis and test to remove this bottleneck.
So an example of a hypothesis we could use to remove the bottleneck with pick a plan could be, we believe that auto-selecting a plan at the pick a plan stage of the acquisition funnel will result in an increased throughput of customers signing up, and we'll know we're successful when we move from acquiring 7 customers a day to 10 customers a day. So once you successfully remove a bottleneck, you can look for the next one to remove and continue the cycle on, gradually optimizing your product to hit the goals that you've set for acquisition, activation, and revenue, but also the targets we have for problem-solution fit, product-market fit, and scale. So this is how you can build a product through experimentation.
So what do you need to remember? First, visualize the journeys customers take to get to the different stages of your product. Then, measure the output of each stage within the journey to find the bottlenecks. And finally, find the lowest output stage and experiment on this to remove the bottleneck. And then you repeat. And this is how you bring everything we've talked about from the beginning together.
So to summarize everything that we've been talking about, here's the key things that you need to remember to build products that people care about. So, number 1, set a minimum level of success, a target that you would be happy with. Break this down into goals for product market fit and problem solution fit using the 10x model. Number 2, understand the value equation. Understand how your product creates value for your customer, and then how you capture some of this value back for yourself, and ensure that your cost is less than or equal to the value you can capture for yourself. Number 3, experiment to test if you can acquire customers to your product before you ever go away and build it. Number 4, break the key stages of your product down into acquisition, activation, and revenue, and then break the journeys that customers take to reach those stages break those journeys down, and then measure the conversion rates of customers through each of those stages. And then 5, you search for the bottlenecks within those journeys. Run experiments to find ways to remove them, and then repeat the cycle.
So if you're interested in finding out more, we recommend reading those books. So the first one is The Goal from Eliyahu Goldratt. It explains the theory of constraints applied to manufacturing, but it's super relevant for product development. It's my personal favorite. Then you have Lean Experimentation in Action, which was written by 2 of our colleagues at ThoughtWorks, and it explains a practical way to approach product experimentation. It's quite a short read, but it has loads of examples, so really recommend this one. And then you have Scaling Lean from Ash Moria, and this book further develops the principle discussed into this talk.
So thank you very much for listening to us. We want to answer any questions that you have, so we're going to be around after the talk. And also, you can feel free to contact us. So these are both our Twitter handles up here. Please feel free to reach out to us, ask us any questions you have about building products. And you can also use the hashtag on Twitter if you want to ask questions or start a bit of a discussion. And we'll be checking that after the talk if you can't reach us now. So yeah, thank you very much again, and feel free to ask us any questions.